And if the mission was to stop and try to slow down the amount of disinformation out there, it's only gotten worse. Thank goodness Google didn't walk away from the table, or else all of us would have been effed.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Public health authorities have not asked those of us in a room mandating us to wear a mask. I am suggesting that you do, even though I don't have one on.
My question is for Mr. Gonez. Mr. Gonez, you started out serving in the legacy media. You then left that. You've started something on your own. It's been very successful. You're digitally based. I believe you've hired 10 employees, if I read correctly. Obviously, diversity is something very important to you. Clearly, you have an audience, and so you've gained the trust of the Canadian public. Kudos to you. Your company seems to be going in the opposite direction of legacy media. And yet, this government made the determination to go ahead with Bill C18, even though they knew that it was supposedly for the benefit of legacy media and to the detriment of digital providers such as yourself. I should say digital media providers such as yourself. You just made a statement that because of the legislation, Bill C18, that your revenue has gone down by 40%. That's a pretty big cut. And obviously what that represents is not just a financial cut to your company, but also it means that Canadians aren't being able to access the news that they want to access, which is, of course, to their detriment. My question for you is this. Clearly, Bill C18 didn't work, isn't working. And so going forward, what is the answer in order to make sure that Canadians have access to quality news, to independent journalism, in a sustained fashion going forward?
Thank you for the question. I understand the intent of C18. As we're all hearing, obviously, the crisis that's unfolding, and of course, we don't want to lose any more journalism in this country. And if any way to sustain that is a good thing, I always believe in an expanded industry is a better industry, because the more stories that are being told, the better for all of us. It's just unfortunate, though, that with the implementation of this bill, one of the largest tech giants who own two of the biggest social platforms that each and every one of us in this room use, we are no longer on those platforms. So what is on those platforms? And if the mission was to stop and try to slow down the amount of disinformation out there, it's only gotten worse, because the trustworthy folks are no longer on there. And for me, when I look at this, I say, thank goodness Google didn't walk away from the table, or else all of us would have been effed. And I don't mean to use that lightly, but it is the truth. What I do want to say, though, is that thank goodness Google did stay at the table, and I truly hope that Meta comes to their senses and comes back to the table. But if there are new funds coming into the ecosystem, I truly hope, everybody in this room will advocate that the people who took a risk to create innovation in this country will have a specific stream allotted to them where they can access some of those funds so they can continue to do the amazing work that we're doing. And I also hope that everybody in this room will advocate for racialized owners of media in this country to also have access to a specific stream so that we can continue to do the fine work and the hard work that we're doing to tell the stories that we've been left out of. And I want everybody to understand that even before this crisis was unfolding, we had problems in the legacy sector. We had problems with diversity. We had problems with the diversity of storytelling. That's not to diminish the hard work of our everyday journalists across this country, but we have to acknowledge the gaps that needed to be filled. And people like me took a risk and said, you know what, I'm going to leave this legacy sector and try to take a risk to fill those gaps. And we were doing a darn good job. And it really is unfortunate, because I believe if this block didn't happen, we probably would be about 50% bigger than we were before this block happened. And so I'm just asking that, as we can't go back in time. The bill is here, and I'm a realist, but what we can do is try to, again, make people whole who have been affected, and also try to foster an ecosystem where we can see other players like GMI emerge across this country, in places like BC, in places like Saskatchewan, in provinces who do suffer from news deserts, and also hopefully have less impact to what's happening in the legacy sector. I just don't want digital first voices to be left out of the conversation, because we have been severely impacted the most from all of what's been transpiring.
Left, Ms. Thomas?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Shields?
Thank you. We've heard a lot about trust. I'm sensing from what you're saying, you had trust in what you were building. Legacy media has lost the trust. We heard a number of 13% of Canadians trust legacy media. What did you do different? What does digital do different that builds that trust?
Well, the trust lost in legacy media is a very complex, and it's a layered thing of why that has happened. There have, of course, been political attacks against legacy, the media industry, which is not fair and should never happen. But there's also an onus on legacy media for not filling those gaps like I identified in storytelling, right? And making sure that we're reflective of the populace across this country. What we've done is try to be a voice for people, to give information the way people speak on the streets. Not everybody speaks in a uniform way that you see on CTV National News. Some people actually have an accent in this country, and it's okay if they hear content with an accent. The mayor of Toronto has an accent. So why can't the news presenter who's giving them that information also have an accent? I'm just saying, there were issues that were at play, and I think there's a lot of Canadians across this country who never felt represented, never felt reflected. And what me and my company and my journalists that I've hired under me, and we have about 10 journalists, but we have about 10 other people who are not journalists who sustain this company, have done, is try to be a proper reflection of the people we serve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gomez, you started out here today saying you had massive losses because of 18 being passed. Not one of the government have talked about this here today, that you lost because C18 passed. Can you comment on what you lost with Bill C18 passing last June, as far as money, as far as staff, as far as vision for your company?
Yeah, leading up to before August hit, we were hiring a journalist every single month. That's how fast we were growing. Because there were, you look at one of our pages just on Instagram alone, average amount of Canadians we were reaching every 30 days was 35 million.
What? 35 million? That's the population of this country.
Yeah. And one thing that we found, which was just so fascinating about the digital landscape, is that we didn't look at what we were doing as a Canadian thing. We thought our stories we can export globally. And I thought that was really fascinating, because what we have in this country is such a unique situation where, you can have somebody who looks like me, whose parents were, immigrants, and now I've been able to start something super successful and start to hire people who didn't have a safe place in some of these other newsrooms across the country. I also understand 100% the intent behind C18. I know the crisis that's taken place. Like I said, I've worked in the second smallest market in this country, and it's Smithers, town of 5,000. And I've also worked in the largest city, and I know what's happening. And so there is a deep need for a strong public broadcaster and sustaining a diverse range of media voices. But it shouldn't come at the hindrance of people who took a risk in this country to create a new ecosystem, to create new opportunities, to give voices to people who were left out of the conversation. And that was always my fear about C18, was that potentially how it was executed wasn't the right way. The intent, yes, I understand, but how it was executed severely affected people who are creating a whole new format that potentially could have been replicated across the world.
You see, the problem with C18 is legacy media has the say. They want to shut you down. They want to shut new digital platforms down. They want all the money. And when you get C18 like it did happen, you're affected. You didn't say much. But all the legacy, Toronto Star had a deal, a side deal with Google. prior to C18. Now they're not maybe going to get as much money as they had hoped, because now Google, 100 million, maybe 75. There still could be side deals. But I think in this country, people, trust has been the issue, and they're looking for news outside the legacy media. I mean, you've proven it. You were in legacy. You went from Smithers to the biggest market. You took the gamble. There's others in this country taking the gamble like you did and are being held back, I believe.
It is unfortunate. And listen, as I said, I believe a healthy media ecosystem is an ecosystem that has all different players. You know, strong players, healthy players that can sustain themselves. I 100% believe that. I just do not believe it should come at the hindrance of people who took a risk to create a whole new ecosystem that was thriving. And so any money that's coming, right, that has been committed, I believe there should be a dedicated stream for people and businesses that created and are created under the premise of living on those same tech giants platforms. We decided we went there first and we created something sustainable. And so there should be a stream dedicated for us. And now, again, I'm not saying all the money should come to us.
Why not?
Well, because I'm not greedy.
That's the
I'm not
future.
greedy. I'm not greedy. And maybe if more, people who were leading the companies weren't like that, had the same mindset, we wouldn't be where we are today. But
Let me ask you this, because I only got a few seconds. Is the government intervention right now holding you back?
it has had an impact.
How much? How much of an impact?
It has had an impact, and I'm hoping that as things are fleshed out, that we can be made whole, as the minister at the time said.